Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The snapback provisions in this agreement are real and powerful, and I think are born out of a deep distrust of Iran. The snapback provisions, as I understand them, allows for any of the 6 powers to the deal to flag what it considers a violation. That concern would be submitted to a dispute resolution panel. If those concerns remain unresolved, the sanctions would resume or snap back after 30 days. Preventing a resumption of sanctions would require a vote of the Security Council from which the United States and its Western allies would have veto power. It's unprecedented and I think very, very powerful and speaks volumes to this deal. Under this deal, uranium would be cut by 98%. The level of enrichment for what remains is 3.67%, a long way from the 90% enrichment that would need to occur to achieve a weapons-grade or fissile material. Centrifuges would be reduced from 19,000 to a little over 6,100 for 10 years. There would be no enrichment at Fordo, and only centrifuges permitted for use would be older first-generation centrifuges. Plutonium. The Iraq facility would be reconstituted so it cannot make weapons-grade material, and materials that do exist there today would be sent out of the country entirely. Number 4, Iran may try to build a nuclear weapon in secret. Mr. Secretary of Energy, I would ask you, through robust monitoring and verification and inspections, the deal would allow inspectors access and to inspect any suspicious site. I heard critics of this plan say that, well, that's like, because of this 24-day period, it's like a police officer calling a drug dealer and to say that we're going to raid your apartment in 24 days so that they can clear all the evidence. Would you speak to this within the context of physics and talk about the half-life of both uranium and plutonium?
I'll start with the last question then, if I may. Well, first of all, technically on the half-life, the half-life of the dominant uranium isotope is roughly the age of the Earth, which is why it still exists in the Earth, and that of the uranium-235, which is the isotope that you would want to enrich for a nuclear weapon, is somewhat shorter and therefore is more rare in nature. However, the issue of first of all, the analog to putting the drugs down the toilet is not very applicable to the use of nuclear materials. And as I've said, in the both unclassified and classified regimes, we have extraordinarily sensitive ways of finding minuscule amounts that are left over from using nuclear materials, whether it's enrichment or whether it's in an explosive environment, to understand its nuclear weapons behavior. So on that, we're very, very clear. And in addition, we have other constraints on them, some of them forever, in terms of other parts of weaponization, like neutron sources, where we also would have some interesting signatures should there be suspicious activity.
Secretary Lew, you had dealt with the issue of the projected amount of money that would be available to Iran once the sanctions are lifted. Iran's currency has lost, my understanding is most of that money is Iranian money in foreign accounts, frozen in foreign accounts. In that, Iran's currency has lost about half its value over the past 3 years. Was that factored into your estimate about the amount of money which will be available to Iran once it comes back to them?
Congressman, I was addressing the specific issue of their reserves that are tied up overseas because of sanctions. We have done enormous damage to their economy. It will take them years to get back to where they would have been if sanctions had not put in place, even if they got that money back. So they're not looking at breaking out into a period of great growth. And I think the challenge here is, we have a pretty good understanding of what the pressures in Iran are right now. We can't, know with certainty what decisions they'll make. We know that, for example, just to get their oil fields up and running properly would require an investment of $100 to $200 billion. So I can't tell you how much of the $50 billion they'll apply to their oil fields, But you have to assume that one of the things they're going to want to do is get their economy moving. So that money will quickly be used for a lot of purposes. I wish I could say that zero, not a nickel, would go to malign purposes. But even with the current sanctions regime, they're finding the money to put into malign purposes. The question is, do they do it with or without a nuclear weapon?